Good morning. I wanted to have a complete lecture of the breakup of Yugoslavia and the subsequent Bosnian conflict or Bosnian War. And so I'm going to put this together right here. If you're going to talk about the Bosnian conflict, then you absolutely have to talk, or the breakup of Yugoslavia, you have to talk about the history of the Balkans. And we really have to begin with the conquering of the Balkans by the Ottoman Empire. So previous to that, so if we look at the Balkans, we can see, where it is in the world, that it's in Southeast Europe. And it's, it's the northern part of it is on the border of Austria. The southern part of it is Greece. And then, of course, across the waters. And then we have Istanbul is on the other side of it, which is, today Turkey. And then on the other side of it, we have Romania and Hungary. And the peoples who live in the Balkans are Slavic. They might be different religious groups, but they all are Slavic peoples. They speak the same language. They claim that they speak different languages, but it looks almost exactly the same. It sounds almost exactly the same. The people from the different regions of the Balkans, whether you're Serbian or Bosnian or Croatian or Slovenian, can all understand each other. They all speak the a same language. Okay, they have a common heritage, ethnically, they're all the same. Okay, so they're all Slavic peoples. And if you look over here, you can see that today, this region is broken up into many different countries. So Slovenia in the north, Croatia then is along the sea. We have Bosnia that's in the center and has a teeny little, access to water. And then we have Serbia. And then in the south, we have Kosovo. And then we have Albania. Albania is not part of what is considered to be Yugoslavia, but the people there are connected to those who live in Kosovo. Okay, so we have these, this large area here where all these people here are Slavic. Now, when the Roman Empire came to a fall, that we have the Eastern Roman Empire. That its headquarters are going to be in Constantinople. And the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire, their religious affiliations will change, as in those who are in the East will be Eastern Orthodox Christians, and those in the Roman Empire will be Catholic. And what we'll see is that those who are in the East of the Balkans, like Serbians, are Eastern Orthodox, and those who are in the West are Catholic, like Slovenians and Croatians are Catholic. But Bosnians and Albanians and Kosovo, people who live in Kosovo, are Muslim. So how did that happen? Well, when as we enter and leave the Middle Ages, we know that the Muslim populations of the Middle East are going to conquer into the Balkans, and they're going to conquer this region all the way up to Austria. Vienna itself will be sacked in the 1500s. So the Muslim populations of what was then the Ottoman Empire will conquer all of these the Balkans, and the Ottomans will control the Balkans all the way until until the mid to late 1800s. So the Serbians will fight a war against the Balkans, or against the Ottoman Empire, when the Ottoman Empire is starting to shrink in its power. As the rest of the world is industrializing, the Ottoman Empire is staying in its traditional form. The Serbians will gain their independence from the Ottoman Empire. Okay. Now, something else that you need to understand about these people and the Ottoman Empires, the Ottoman Empire had a very interesting way that they conquered people. They gave people an option. And this is one of the ways that they maintained control of populations. So they gave people an option when they conquered them, that they could either join their religion, so they could convert to Islam. And then if they did, they would be full citizens. They would be full participating members of the Ottoman Empire. They would live peacefully. They wouldn't have to pay taxes. They had all these benefits, okay? Or they could keep their religion, but if they did that, then they would have to pay taxes to the Ottoman Empire. And then in addition, they would have to donate a son. Every family had to donate a son to the Ottoman Empire, all Christians had to donate a son. So whether you were Slovenia or Croatian or Serbian, you had to donate a son to the Ottoman Empire. These sons became this elite military force called the Janissaries. And the son was given as a child, as a super young, as soon as they had left their infancy, pretty much as toddlers, they were given over to the Ottoman Empire and then trained to be this elite military force. So the truth is, they could come back and kick your butt later. You know, you get literally, there are stories of mothers who are going to be attacked by their own sons. So I mean, it's this kind of like terrifying, horrible situation, but it's like, this is what you chose. You chose to stay your religion, and this is the consequence. And so this is a way for the Ottomans to control the population, because first of all, if you choose to be to join Islam and to become Muslim, then the chances are that you're not going to fight back against the Ottoman Empire and the rulers. But if you choose not to, then you're probably you're probably going to be a problem to them. You're going to be rebellious. So they keep control of you through this tax that you have to pay, and then taking your sons from you, which will then become this military force. So the Slavic peoples of the Balkans made different choices. As you can see, Bosnians, who are the same ethnic background, are going to choose to convert. And what we'll see is that this area of the Balkans will become Muslim. And when we are talking about this, how long ago did this happen? We are talking like 1,000 years ago that they made this choice, when the Ottoman Empire first conquered, okay? So the Bosnians will become Muslim. We will see people throughout, this southern region. And we have all of these peoples down here. The Albanians will become Muslim, but Croatians and Slovenians will stay Catholic, and Serbians will stay Eastern Orthodox. So you can imagine there's going to be a little bit of bitterness over the next 1,000 years about, you are a traitor, you chose the conqueror, versus, a Serbian who will feel as if, they stood up for what they believed in. And there's going to be this very strong nationalistic tendency that will come from the religious affiliation that you are. So if you're Serbian and you're Eastern Orthodox Christian, that is part of who you are as a person. Not only is it your nationality and your religion, it is what makes you as a culture, as a human being, versus Bosnians, who are the same exact ethnicity. They speak the same language, but they have chosen a different religion, and it will completely separate these people. Okay. Now, so that brings us up to, let's come up to the 19th century, when these Bosnian or the Serbian wars are fought, and they will be fought, they're called I think the Balkan Wars, actually, in the late 1800s. And the Serbians will gain their independence in these two wars that are fought against the Ottoman Empire. And when they get their independence, the entire region is going to gain its independence. And then Austria will come in and annex Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia. So Serbia will remain independent, but the rest of these will be annexed by Austria. Okay, and this is Austria. The Austro-Hungarian Empire is trying to grow itself, and it can't go west. Those countries are industrialized, and there's no way they'll win that fight. So they start moving eastward. And so they annex these regions. And of course, Serbia is angry at Austria for this, and this will lead to World War I. So this nationalism that we see rise up in the Balkans, Serbia, will, because there are Serbians, if we look at the population numbers of Bosnia today, 60% of the population is Bosnian, meaning Muslim. 30% of the population is Serbian, meaning Eastern Orthodox Christians, and 10% of the population is other, mostly Croatians, okay? Most Serbians live in this region here, the eastern part of Bosnia. Most Bosnians live in the central region here, and most Croatians live up here in the north, okay? But you have to understand, it's not black and white. It's like little pockets of villages and cities that are, so there's pockets of Serbians within the Bosnian regions, and there's pockets of Bosnians within the Serbian region. So you can't separate the two, okay? So in world, because of World War I, you have this Serbian nationalist who is going to shoot the heir to the throne of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. We all know this. And then, and the gun will be supplied by Serbia. So this is an example of Serbian nationalism that was happening all the way back, in World War I. And then, so we have World War I. It's after World War I when these states are made independent. And then eventually, what will happen is in World War II, the Yugoslavians, or the Slavic peoples, will unite together to fight against the Nazis. And the general in charge of that fight, his name was General Tito, and he was Croatian. And he will be the leading general to fight against the Nazis. And he will unite all of the Slavic peoples together to, under this idea of let's get rid of the Nazis. He was also a communist, okay? And he was a believer that we should get rid of our religious differences. We should unite together under this idea that we should all be equal. So when World War II came to an end, he was brilliant, such a smart guy, Tito. He went to the Serbians in Belgrade and he said, look, let's unite together into one state. We'll call it Yugoslavia, which Yugo means united. So united Slavic peoples is what that means. And we will unite together into one state. We will put aside our religious differences and we'll become one people. And Tito will make the capital Belgrade, which is the capital of Serbia. He was brilliant because what he does is he says, I'm Croatian, but I'm going to let you Serbians really run the country, but I will be the figurehead. So we have, this is going to unite really Croatians and Serbians together, but then he will also pledge to protect Bosnians. So during this time of communism, there will be a lot of peace. Tito will be able to keep the religious differences separated. The people will be united together, but then that brings us to after Tito's death and the fall of communism. So when, what happened? Okay, like I've already said, the breakup of Yugoslavia, there's 8 different ethnic groups, all united by communist rule. But in 1989, we start to see the fall of communism. The Eastern Bloc, people begin to declare their independence from the Soviet Union. One thing you need to understand, Yugoslavia was never connected to the Soviet Union. It was communist, but it was an independent sovereign state. Didn't want to follow communism or didn't want to follow Soviet leadership and kind of was on their own. And in 1990, they will have elections for the first time. And Slobodan Milosevic, who was a Serbian, will be elected the first president of Yugoslavia, okay? But as soon as he's elected, we will start to hear these desires for independence. And in 1991, Slovenia and Croatia will both declare themselves independent from Yugoslavia. There will be a fight that ensues. It will not last very long. It will only last a few months. And one of the reasons why is because the Serbians will not have the desire to really fight against Slovenia and Croatia because they have the backing of Austria, and that, you don't want to get into another war with Austria. But then in 1992, Bosnia will declare itself independent. And when we say Bosnia, we are talking about this 60% majority Bosnians who live in this land that you would say is Bosnia. The Serbian minority then begins killing their Bosnian neighbors because they do not want Bosnia to gain its independence because they are Serbians living in Bosnia. It's almost like this, this similar, where you see this World War I, a Serbian nationalist who wants to unite Bosnia with Serbia, okay? And of course, these Serbian nationalists are being backed by Serbia itself. Remember that if the capital of Yugoslavia was Belgrade, then that means that's where all the tanks are, and where all the guns are, and where all the weapons are. And it's going to be those weapons that will back the Serbian nationalists in Bosnia. So this will begin what we call the Bosnian War. And this civil war will turn into what we call ethnic cleansing by the Serbian military, as the Serbians will say, okay, if you want to be independent, then you can be independent, but you are not going to be allowed to take any Serbian neighborhoods. But I've talked to you about this, and I told you that you can't separate some of these, like especially over here. This is where most of the killing, ethnic cleansing is going to happen. So in this region over here, there's pockets of Bosnians, of Muslims, who live in this really Serbian majority area. So this is where most of the killing will take place. What will happen is that the Serbian military will invade into this Serbian majority area and will go to these pockets of Muslim communities and Bosnian communities and will say, we're going to relocate you, get into this truck. And then you can imagine they're never seen again. And in 1995, evidence will come out, as it's been going on now for 3 years of this mass killing. In 1995, evidence will come out of this massacre that has happened, where they have rounded up in eastern Bosnia these Muslim communities and just have, we're talking about, you know, like thousands of Bosnians who have been massacred and put into these mass graves. When that happens, NATO comes in, the North Atlantic Treaty Organizations, and starts bombing the Serbian forces. And a ceasefire is reached. And then the United Nations comes in and starts to investigate and starts finding these massive graves of thousands and thousands and thousands of Bosnians that have been killed. In the eastern part, in this city called Srebrenica, which is one of the Muslim majority cities that is in the eastern Serbian area of Bosnia, the United Nations will set up a research facility where they will start recording all these bodies and will start to taking DNA to try and figure out who is who, and will begin burying these bodies. As this is going on for the next several years, Slobodan Milosevic is still the president of Serbia. There are still attacks going on against Bosnians. The United Nations is there in an attempt to try and keep the peace. This is just peacekeepers who are there. They're not there to fight. They're only there to try and keep the peace. And in 1998, Serbians will then begin killing Muslims in the south of Serbia, which is Kosovo region, which I showed you. Those are Albanian Muslims who live in Serbia. And in response to that, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization will then bomb the capital of Serbia. They will bomb Belgrade. Slobodan Milosevic will be declared a criminal. He will be found and arrested, and he will then be charged with war crimes, taken to The Hague in the Netherlands, where he will be tried as a criminal. However, he was never taken to trial because he was poisoned in prison and died in, I think it was 2000. This brings us to my experience in Bosnia, okay? And so we will continue this lecture later today when I am lecturing with my AP Euro class. All right, so this first image, I want you to take a look at the map again, and let's talk about Yugoslavia real quick and talk about the different regions of Yugoslavia. So if we look up here to the map, you can see that what was Yugoslavia is broken today into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really about 5 countries, not really 5 countries, really 4 countries, but then there's also regions within these countries, okay? So the north is Slovenia, that is bordered by Austria. Slovenia is Catholic, the people from Slovenia are Catholic. They are the most, their architecture looks Austrian. So they have mostly ties to Austria. Croatia, they're also Catholic. Their architecture looks mostly Italian. They were conquered by the Romans and then by the Viennese and by the Italians, and they are also Catholic, okay? If you take a look at Bosnia, you can see here, if you take a look at Bosnia, you can see, do you see where they have the little dotted lines in that map? That represents the inside, that's all Bosnians. That's like Muslims, 100% population. Then it's mixed. in the other areas. So this would be a mix of Serbians and Bosnians. This is a mix of Serbians and Bosnians and also Albanians down here in the south. And then up here in the north is the mix of Bosnians and Croatians. The population numbers of Yugoslavia, of Bosnia itself, 60% of the population is Muslim Bosnian, 30% is Serbian, and then 10% is Croatian, okay? The Bosnian Serbian population, it makes up mostly, this is the mix. So a majority of the people who live in the region on the right are Serbian with pockets of Bosnians. And then of course in Bosnia in the center area are mostly Bosnians with pockets of Serbians, okay? So when Bosnia declared its self-independence, of course, the people in the right-hand side there want to join with Serbia, okay? They don't want to be part of Bosnia because they're Serbians. The problem is they're pockets of Bosnians. And traditionally, Muslim Bosnians are not liked or cared for by Serbians. There's a huge conflict between these two people, and there has been for like 1,000 years. But there are large pockets of Bosnian population in that area, and that's where most of the massacres will take place. If you take a look at these pictures that I have here for you, on the top right-hand side is the Srebrenica massacre, International United Nations World Heritage Site. This is where every body that has been recovered from the massacre, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing that happened there has been buried. Each and every, so you can see on the bottom right-hand side just how many people. The total at this point, they change the number every year as they find more bodies. Today, the total is at like 8,936, I think is the number. But every year they find somewhere between 30 and 100 more bodies. And then they bury more. So we don't even know how many it's going to be. If you take a look down here on the bottom left-hand side, you can see a picture from the side of the road. As we were driving through Croatia, we saw these signs. I was like, what the heck? And I look and it says landmine, like don't get out of your car. And when we were driving along the road, we passed several UN trucks that were mine detonating trucks. They were like, their job is to search for these landmines and detonate them. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like driving through a war zone, right? It's really crazy. It's really wild. Okay, so what we want to do now is go to my Facebook. So let me go ahead and click on this here. Actually, my Facebook photos, I'm going to start with Dubrovnik. Did any of you guys see, what was that super popular show? Suddenly I can't remember. I didn't watch it. It was like everybody watched it all the time. It was like kind of like Vikings and everybody killing each other, kings and queens. It was like the most popular show in the world like a couple of years ago. What? Yes, Game of Thrones. That was filmed here. Dubrovnik. Okay, so if you watch Game of Thrones. Dubrovnik is in Croatia. It's along the water, and it was conquered by the Romans originally and then by the Viennese. It looks very Italian. You can even see that tower there. It totally looks like a Tuscan tower. Okay, so you can see that. And then there's lots of Catholic churches here. So I'm going to really quickly go through. I just want you to see. Oh, wait a minute here. Okay. I need to, I'm doing two things at once. Okay, so I have to go like this. I'm going to go through. Maybe I should just do. So let me get through these photos. So again, here's some more pictures of Dubrovnik. You can see you know, it looks very Italian. Looks very Italian. More, it's just to give you an idea, so you can really see the difference between these towns. Again, all Slavic peoples. The beautiful beaches. Croatia is gorgeous, by the way. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. I want to go this way. Go really fast. Oh, that's a good picture. Okay, so getting back here. There we go. Okay, so you can see the Italian. I mean, look at the Roman. These are Roman columns, you guys. These are absolutely Roman architecture. And then later, of course, Roman is going to become, you know, Italian. So again, just very, very Italian influence. Okay. Okay. At this point, I'm trying to get to. Okay, this is when we're leaving. So you can see we are entering now Bosnia. And immediately, there's absolutely pictures of my husband. Okay. Okay, so we're leaving, we are entering Bosnia. Immediately, you see a financial difference. The roads in Bosnia are a mess, like the worst roads you can imagine. Probably like driving in some of the horrible roads in Mexico, maybe, or something like that. Just pothole. There were times when we were terrified that we were not gonna, our car wasn't gonna survive. We're surprised our insurance company even let us drive there. Okay, this is one of the first cities in Bosnia we went to. It's a very famous city. Beautiful archway over this. Can you turn off one of the lights for me, dear? So you guys, you actually can turn them both off. And look at this. What do I immediately see when I get to this town? For the first time in all of Europe, what do I see? Mosques and minarets. And I immediately say, wow, it's like Dorothy saying, like, we're not in Kansas anymore. Though we are in Europe, and these people are white. Like, we are talking about blonde hair, blue-eyed Muslims. Never seen it before. Okay, so I get there and I'm like, whoa, this is wild. I have never been in Europe and seen mosques before. And you immediately know that you're in a different place. Okay. You can actually go inside the mosques. They let you go inside. So here's pictures of inside the mosque. The minaret towers, beautiful construction, absolutely gorgeous. This is the famous bridge. And you can see this look of like these Arabic markets, you know, like you feel like, you know, so this is Bosnia. Absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful. All these, by the way, Islamic art is very geometric. So there's lots of this. And then here we are, guys. You ready for this? You can see this. This is driving into Sarajevo. So we start driving into Sarajevo then, and immediately I was like, oh my God, there's bullet holes all over these buildings. Like, that's, to me, is wild, right? And I immediately know we have entered a war zone, okay? And this is on the outskirts of Sarajevo. This is inside our apartment. Right here, this building right here is the Norwegian embassy. So this is the Norwegian embassy right there. So we're like, oh, this is a really safe neighborhood, right? But this is what the building looks like on the outside. You can see that it's, you know, really like not really taken care of very well. It's a nice neighborhood, but it's a little scary. And this is the bridge. Guess who was shot and killed on the other side of this bridge? Yeah, this is Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot and killed right here. That's right where he was shot. Okay, so this is a really like historically important. This is a plaque to where he was shot. See, again, Serbian nationalism. And then we walk down into the marketplace. And oh my God, I feel like I've walked into the Arabic world. I don't feel like I'm in Europe anymore. Beautiful. And then here's the picture. This is the picture I took from outside my window to the other building. So these are all bullet holes. And I'm like, this is wild, right? This is like a different world. These are apricots that we bought. And here's a picture of us from the Serbian-held hills. So if you look down here, this is where we're staying, right down here at the bottom of this hillside. Where we were staying, right down at the bottom of this hillside. And this is where the Serbians during the war had their what do you even call them? Where, you know, their what do you call it where you're shooting people? What do you call it? You're like your eagle's nest or whatever, where you're you know, you're shooting people in the city. This is where they're shooting off rockets into the city. And you can see that Sarajevo is surrounded by mountains. So the Serbians had control of all the mountains surrounding the city. And so they're able to just lob bombs down into the city and able to just shoot. And they're getting all this stuff from the Serbian government, of course, right? This is one of the reasons why the neighborhood that I was staying in had bullet holes all over, because it was the closest to these hills. And so they were just shooting randomly down at people, okay? So you couldn't go out during the day. It was absolutely dangerous to go out during the day. So more examples of just Arabic influence. This is standard breakfast, a Turkish coffee and baklava. We went on a tour of the Serbian held areas, which included what's this called? The luge and the suddenly can't remember what it's called. This is a very important place to the Bosnian conflict. This was a home that they had built a tunnel underneath this home that went underneath the airport. The airport was held by the United Nations. So it was like this war-free area. And then on the other side was held by the Bosnians. It was you know, so the Serbians didn't have control of that. So there was a tunnel built under the airport that would then get people and weapons and food in and out of Sarajevo. This was their only way of getting any goods in and out of. So this tunnel is really important. You can see bullet holes all over it, right? And this was a map of Sarajevo, and you can see these are Serbian held. Everything that's orange is Serbian held. And then you can see this was Bosnian held area, and then this is the airport here. And then this is Serbian or Bosnian held area. So you can see why the people of Sarajevo were completely trapped for 3 years. Okay. So it's going down into the tunnel. Again, more, you can see more of like evidence of the war and bullet holes on the building. These were called roses, Sarajevo roses, they're called. Everywhere where a bomb dropped and exploded and somebody died, they went back and painted it red as evidence that somebody had died of a rocket launch or a bomb that had gone off. And there's all over the cities. You're walking around and there's just all of these red roses all over the place. So there's some new construction in Sarajevo. This is a picture from the hillside looking down. This is the main square or walkway. This is where most people were killed during the war, because it's the main street that separates you from the old part of town to the new part of town. And this is where snipers, that's what they're called, would set up in the hillsides and just take out anybody who was trying to walk across the street during the day. So you were really, really unsafe. You just didn't have any freedom. So that's why they would come out at night and do all their business at night. This was, again, on a tour. This guy who took us on a tour was a Bosnian. And he showed us some really interesting things. So what's this called, guys, when you go down the slide? What's it called? Huh? Bobsled, that's it, bobsled. I couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't think of it. Yeah, so this is the Olympic bobsled. And the Serbians had control of the bobsled track and the entire hillside. So, of course, it just completely tied up and everything. Okay, this is a really important image I want to show you here. To give us perspective of this conflict, our Bosnian tour guide who smokes, he was like, oh, to give you an example, here is the 3 different languages spoken in Yugoslavia. The top one is Serbian, quote unquote. The second one is Bosnian, and the third one is Croatian. As you can see, the second one, so the second one, when it says dip cigarette, they're almost exactly the same. Do you see that? Almost exactly the same. So Bosnian, Croatian, almost exactly the same. The top one, Serbian, is exactly, good job, Jenna. It's exactly the same, except for the Serbians demand on using the Russian alphabet. So if they did use the Arabic alphabet, I guess you call it, isn't that what it is, the Arabic alphabet? If they use the Arabic alphabet or the English alphabet or whatever you want to call it, it would say the exact same thing. So their languages, and they all sound exactly the same. If you go to Serbia today, they have taken down all of their signs that are written in the same language as Croatian and Bosnian and have replaced them with the Russian alphabet. So, and it's funny because sometimes when you're in Serbia, you can see the two signs because they didn't take down the first one, they just put up the second one. And it almost seems you're just kind of like, oh, it's really funny. And like now they're trying to become much more Russian in their national nature, okay? So you can see that they have all these similarities. And here's some pictures of the market downtown. Again, you know, I'm seeing mosques here in Europe, you know, and I'm like, wow, this is wild. Here's a picture inside the courtyard of the mosque. It was absolutely gorgeous. This is Bosnian food. It was yummy. This is, by the way, this is totally a Russian dish. That's interesting, right? So you have this Bosnian dish that I have had at Russian restaurants. So you can see that, like, all the cultural mix that's going on in what was Yugoslavia. What did you say it's called? So I suddenly can't remember what it's called in that, but pelmeni, is that what you said? Because pelmeni is what we called it in Russian, was pelmeni. Okay, here is a park that was a block away from my Airbnb. What's in this park? Tombstones. I'm just like, blows my mind. I'm like, there's just tombstones in a park where people were like, we have to bury our dead. And this is what Muslim tombs look like, by the way. Just so you know, you can see they're just these, you know, just these, this shape here that they use. This was inside of the city hall. This place was bombed in the war. Absolutely gorgeous. The UN has paid for it to be rebuilt. This is what it looked like during the war. Isn't that sad? And it's one of the only buildings that's been rebuilt, because to rebuild a city like this is so expensive and they don't have any money to rebuild it themselves. So it has to come from international funding. Here is the Olympics. We went over to the Olympic grounds. Oh, this just broke my heart. Here's this amazing Olympic grounds that they could do amazing things with, and it's just falling apart. You know, there's nothing happening there because, you know, they were at war and it was destroyed, and they don't have any money to like turn it into anything else. This is a picture of, again, the city hall that's been rebuilt. Beautiful. This was the one hotel that Serbians were not allowed to attack. Hotel Europe, it was called. And it was where all the journalists were housed. So if you were a journalist, you were not, if you left the hotel, you were not guaranteed your safety. If you left the hotel was never bombed. But you can see, here's a Sarajevan rose across the street. That's how close that the forces came to. And so I remember when I was a kid watching on the news, the attacks in Sarajevo, the Bosnian conflict, and all the journalists were recording from the rooftop of this hotel, and you could see the bombs going off in the distance, you know. These are all over the city. So they had to, every public place was turned into a cemetery. So if you're standing at the top of the hill overlooking the city, there's just white, because all the tombstones are all white. And so you'll see these blankets of white throughout the city of where these people are killed. And more of these Sarajevo roses. Images of the Olympics. That's the image from the Olympics. That's why my shirt has on it. Inside, this is where all of the opening ceremonies happened. The opening ceremonies. So remember when, you know, the Olympics, they have like big parade, everybody comes in and shows off. So this is where that happened. More cemeteries. And this is the city hall today. You can see the outside of it, absolutely gorgeous. This is only about 3 blocks from Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated. It's really kind of funny that they both took place within a couple blocks of each other. So again, more beautiful pictures of City Hall. Oh, this was just like a German. Okay, here's more pictures. Another thing that was really wild about this city is that because it's Muslim, you can hear the call to prayer. So we would hear it throughout the day, and it was like beautiful to hear this call to prayer throughout the city. Sometimes I would just sit at the window and listen. It's just beautiful, beautiful. So more of like this Muslim influence, this Islamic influence within the city. I'm trying to get to the Srebrenica Knefe. Have you guys ever had knefe? Anybody? Oh my God, you're missing out. It's good stuff. So these markets, so that's knefe. Again, it just looks like these. Okay, so then this takes us to the Srebrenica massacre. When we were driving to Serbia, and we stopped here to take a look at this, and you can see at that point it was 8,372 people, and now they've added another like I think like a couple hundred bodies since then. So you've seen these pictures from the slide. So these were the bodies that had been buried the day before we got there. You can see the new earth. They're all marked. Remember, they don't bury them until they have identified them. They have to do DNA. They ask for Bosnians to donate their DNA to this so they can match the DNA and find out who it is. And then they put their name on these lists. And then you can go to visit. This is the building that was set up by the United Nations to do the research. So it used to be a factory, and they turned it into this massive warehouse. You see this massive warehouse? This is where they collected all the dead bodies. Imagine thousands of dead bodies just laid out on this floor. And where they would do all the DNA work to try and figure out who was who. So today you just walk through the memorial and you can This is, you can see the bodies laid out in their body bags, all their numbers before they bury them. One of the reasons why the United Nations finally got involved, remember that it started in 92. The United Nations didn't get involved until 95, was because Bosnians came to President Clinton and met with him and asked him, gave him evidence and showed him and said, you have to pressure the United Nations to come help us. And he was so moved by them that he said, okay. And that's why the United Nations finally went there. So Bosnians love Americans. They're like, you guys saved us. If it wasn't for President Clinton, they love Clinton. If it wasn't for President Clinton, the whole thing maybe never would have ended. So there's this great feeling that the US was so helpful. Then we passed into Serbia, and oh my God, it was just like a total change. It's like the world came to, it just completely changed. One of the things we saw a lot of was this East, it suddenly looked like Eastern Europe. Like these big haystacks, these little villages. Did not look Muslim anymore. And boom, we get to Serbia, and what do we see? Eastern Orthodox churches. No more mosques. Eastern Orthodox Church. In fact, the largest, this is, by the way, the largest Eastern Orthodox church in the world is in Belgrade. So these guys are seriously Eastern Orthodox, like with the capital E, okay? And when I was there, I thought to myself, I mean, you know, I'm always thinking three ways, right? I'm always thinking three ways. So we got to Serbia, and I'm thinking to myself, I know the Ottomans conquered this land, so there's got to be mosques around, like remnants of them. And I didn't see any, but then we got to our apartment, and across the street was a mosque. And I was like, oh, there's mosques, so it must not be so bad for Muslims in Serbia, right? And then I looked it up and found out it was the only mosque in the entire country. That when the Serbians gained their independence, that they actually tore down every single mosque in the entire country except for that one. And today it's illegal for Muslims in Serbia to practice their faith outside of that mosque. So if you're Muslim and you live in Serbia, you are not allowed to practice your faith unless you go to Belgrade and you go to that mosque. So if you're having a secret prayer ceremony in your house, you can be arrested. So you can see Serbia looks much more European. So these are some of the buildings in Bosnia, or in Belgrade, I mean, much more European feel. This one building here, I was like, oh, this looks totally communist. You can see this was built during the communist rule. It totally has that feel to it. And there's there's one building I want you to see from Serbia. This is a Tesla's home. Nikola Tesla, he was Serbian. And I want to get you to, this is inside of that Eastern Orthodox church. And this is actually really interesting. This is a medieval Ottoman. So you can see the Ottoman feel to it. Do you see that? This Arabic archways that are in this, fortress that's on top of this cliffside overlooking the Danube River. Now, the thing about the Danube is that is the point at which the farthest the Austrian-Hungarian Empire ever extended, this point right here. So, this image right here, that's the Danube River. This is Belgrade. And then Belgrade is the point at which the Ottomans were able to stop the Austrian Hungarian invasion. So it was like this point where the Ottomans and the Europeans met, okay? And like that's where pretty much a lot of battles happen. As you can imagine, when you have this massive fortress that's overlooking this river, you can probably protect your city pretty well. This is looking up at that fortress. Then, this is interesting. This is a memorial built during the time of Yugoslavia. It was built by a Croatian, as a dedication to France. Why? Because in World War I, the Serbians were aligned with France and with England. And they thanked France for helping them because, of course, Serbia was in the side of the alliance and they gained their independence after World War I. So while we were there, President Macron visited, the president of France. And there were all these French flags all over the place. And he actually spoke while me and Mr. Hartman were walking through the park. We could hear him. This is the very first McDonald's behind the Iron Curtain. Isn't that amazing? It was built in it has the date on there. I can't remember, but like 1993. The very first McDonald's after the Iron Curtain fell was built in Belgrade. So you can see that it would have been, that it's going to have that influence. So I was like, oh, wow, that's so cool. The very first McDonald's, 1988. You can see that, 1988, opened in 1988, the very first McDonald's. More of our fortress. Overlooking the Danube. This is the last picture I want to show you. And this is because this is really important. This building right here is where Tito, at the end of World War II, met with Serbian forces, and he said, I will put the capital here. Let's unite together and let's give up our religious differences and unite as one. And remember, Yugo, well, actually, I gave this in an earlier lecture. Yugo means united. So Yugoslavia is what? The Slavics united. So this is the point when Yugoslavia was created. And so the question is, was this region better off under communism? That could be argued, right? Okay, so this gives you an example of the conflict. Now, today, I do have one more picture I want to show you. And it's this one right here. In 1995, Serbia bombed Kosovo and began ethnic cleansing of the Muslims in Kosovo, their southern region. Wait just one second. And that's when the NATO bombed them. This is one of the bombings that happened in Serbia. And the Serbians have refused to rebuild this building as a symbol of American aggression against Serbia. And when I went on the tour and they were explaining that, I was like, me and my husband were like, but do you ever talk about the fact that you were killing Muslims in Kosovo and that's why that bomb happened? But that's an awkward question to ask your tour guide. That's Serbian, so we didn't ask. But it's an example of that still, this anger and resentment and nationalism that is still among these people, the Slavic peoples of Yugoslavia. I would not be surprised if this story is not over. Or I would not be surprised, I should say. Okay, guys, thank you for listening. I will see you later. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.